Good day, sir. I am Charian P. Mara, J2B. Rule number 8. Action to avoid collision. Any action taken to avoid collision shall be taken in accordance with the rules of this part and shall, if the circumstances of this case admit, be positive, made in ample time and with due regards of the observance of good seamanship. Any alteration of course and or speed to avoid collision shall, if the circumstances of the case admit, be large enough to be readily apparent to another vessels. Observing visually or by radar, a succession of small alteration of the course or speed should be avoided. If there is sufficient sea room, alteration of course alone may be the most effective action to avoid a close quarters situation, provided that is made in good time, insubstantial, and does not result in another close quarters situation. Action taken to avoid collision with another vessel shall be such as to result in passing at a safe distance. The effectiveness of the action shall be carefully checked until the other vessels is finally passed and clear. If necessary to avoid collision or allow more time to assess the situation, a vessel shall slacken her speed or take all away off by stopping or reversing her means of the propulsion. Of vessels which by any of these rules is required not to impede the passage or safe passage of another vessel shall, when required by the circumstances of the case, take early action to allow sufficient sea room for the safe passage of the other vessels. A vessel required not to impede the passage or safe passage of another vessels is not relieved or this obligation if approaching the other vessels so as to involve risk of collision, and shall, when taking action, have full regards to the action which may be required by the rules of this part. A vessels thus passage of which is not to be impeded remains fully obligated to comply with the rules of this part when the two vessels is approaching one another so as to involve risk of collision. Rule number 9. Narrow channels. A vessels proceeding along the course of the narrow channel or fairway shall keep or near to the outer limit of the channel or fairway which lies on her starboard side as is the safe and practicable. A vessels of less than 20 meters in length or a sailing vessels shall not impede the passage of a vessels which can safely navigate only within a narrow channel or fairway. A vessels engaged in fishing shall not impede the passage of any other vessels navigate within a narrow channel or fairway. A vessel shall not cross a narrow channel or fairway if such crossing impedes the passage of a vessel which can safely navigate only within such channel or fairway. The latter vessels may use the sound signals predictable in Rule 34 if in a doubt as to the intention of the cruising vessels in a narrow channel or fairway without overtaking can take place only in the vessels to be overtaken has to take action. To permit safe passing, the vessels intended to overtake shall indicate her intention by sounding the appropriate signal prescribed in Rule 34. The vessels to be overtaken shall, if in agreement, sound the appropriate signals prescribed in Rule 34, and take step to permit safe passing. If in a doubt, she may sound the signals prescribed in Rule 34. This rule does not relieve the overtaking vessels of her obligation under Rule 13. A vessels nearing a bend or an area of a narrow channel of fairway where another vessels may be obscured by an information obstruction, shall navigate with particular alertness and caution and shall sound the appropriate signal prescribed in Rule 34. Any vessel shall, if the circumstances of the case admit, avoid anchoring in a narrow channel. Rule number 13. Traffic separation schemes. These rules applies to traffic separation schemes adopted by the organization and does not relieve any vessels of her obligation under any other rule. A vessel using a traffic separation scheme shall proceed in the appropriate traffic lane in the general direction of a traffic flow that the lane so far as predictable keep clear or a traffic separation line or separation zone. Normally, join or leave a traffic lane at the termination of the lane, but when joining or leaving from either side shall do so as a small or as an angle the general direction of traffic flow as predictable. A vessel shall so far as practicable avoid crossing traffic lanes, but if obligated to do so shall cross on the heading as nearly as practicable at right angle to the general direction of traffic flow. A vessel shall not use an inshore traffic zone when she can safely use the appropriate traffic line within the adjacent traffic separation scheme. However, vessels of the less than 20 meters in the length, sailing vessels and vessels engaged in fishing may use the inshore traffic zone. Notwithstanding subparagraph, vessels may use an inshore traffic zone when en route to or from a port, offshore installation or structure, pilot station, or any other place situated within the inshore traffic zone or to avoid immediate danger. A vessel other than a cruising vessels or a vessels joining or leaving a line shall not normally enter a separation zone or cross a separation line except in a case of emergency to avoid immediate danger to engage in fishing within a separation zone. A vessels navigating in areas near the termination of traffic separation scheme shall do so with particular caution. A vessel shall so far as practicable avoid anchoring in a traffic separation scheme or in areas near its terminations. A vessel not using a traffic separation scheme shall avoid it by a wide margin as impracticable. A vessel engaged in fishing shall not impede the passage of the any vessels flowing a traffic line. A vessel of less than 20 meters in length or a sailing vessel shall not impede the safe passage of the power-driven vessel. Following a traffic line, a vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver when engaged in an operation for the maintenance of safety of navigation in a traffic separation scheme is exempted from complying with this rule to the extent necessary to carry out the operation. A vessel restricted in her ability to maneuver when engaged in an operation for the laying, servicing, or picking up of the submarine capable within a traffic separation scheme is extended to complying with this rule to the extent necessary to carry out the operation. Rule number 11. Application. Rules in this section apply to vessels inside of one another. Rule number 12. Sailing vessels. When two sailing vessels are approaching one another so as to involve risk of collision, one of them shall keep out of the way of the another as follows. When each has the wind of different side, the vessels which has the wind on the port side shall keep out of the way of the other. When both have the wind of the same side, the vessels which is a windward shall keep out of the way of the vessels which is to leeward. If a vessels with the wind on the port side sees a vessels to windward and cannot determine with certainty whether the other vessels has the wind on the port or on the starboard side, she shall keep out of the way of the other. For the purpose of this rule, the windward side shall be deemed to be side opposite to that on with the mainsail is carried, or in the case of the square ridge vessels, the side opposite to that on which the largest fore and aft sail is carried. That's all, and thank you for listening.